My husband's family started looking for a new bride for him while we were still married. We got divorced, but when I became a famous designer and bought out their company, my phone wouldn't stop ringing with their calls. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just finished reorganizing the linen closet, my latest escape project ever since David stopped making eye contact when he got home. I was halfway down the hall when I saw the back door ajar, something flickering behind the glass, and then laughter. Soft, intimate, familiar. I stepped outside, barefoot, confused. The air was thick with jasmine from the trellis. I followed the sound like a ghost, drifting toward the guest house we rarely used. And there they were, David, my husband of 7 years, and Julia, my once best friend, the girl who held my hand when my mom died, who gave the toast at our wedding. She was sitting on the arm of the chair, fingers in his hair like she owned the damn world. He kissed her like he used to kiss me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned around, walked back into the main house, and found the envelope on the entryway table, embossed with gold, thick as cardboard. A dinner invitation from the Lachlan family. His mother's handwriting in that stiff, looping script I've always hated. Family celebration. Julia's return from Paris. Formal attire. The timing would have been hilarious if it hadn't made me want to burn the house down. Let me back up. My name is Alice Morrow Lachlan, though I've stopped using the last part lately. Even before the mess, I married into one of the oldest, wealthiest families in town. Lachlan and Sons Furniture. They've been building empires out of cherry wood and arrogance since 1892. To them, I was always the outsider, the provincial girl with no pedigree, no fancy alumni network. Without a tribe, his mother once said to her bridge club. I was raised by a single father who fixed cars for a living and never missed a softball game. I didn't grow up poor, but I knew the value of duct tape and a well-timed prayer. So when I met David in college, charming, polished, magnetic, I didn't think twice. I fell like a stone. His family tolerated me at first, then ignored me, then sharpened their smiles into knives once I became his wife. I never quite fit their mold. I didn't know which fork to use at those excruciating charity dinners. I didn't wear the right designers or speak with the kind of graceful detachment they admired. I felt like an exhibit, common girl, trying very hard. But I tried. God, I tried. And now, the same family who'd always looked down on me was about to raise a glass to the woman who stole my husband, my best friend. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I went to bed in the guest room and stared at the ceiling fan until it blurred. My fingers curled around my phone like a lifeline. I typed a message to Julia, deleted it, then another to David. Deleted that too. At 3:04 a.m., I finally settled on a note to myself. Do not let them define you. You are more than someone else's mistake. It felt like a lie, but it was the only thing keeping me upright. The next morning, David acted like nothing happened, kissed me on the cheek, said something about meetings downtown, and left with his usual scent of bergamot and entitlement trailing behind him. I stood in our marble kitchen, staring at the perfect row of bar stools I'd chosen and thought, this isn't my home. This was never my home. And then I made a decision. I put on the dress his mother hated, the navy one with the bold print that made me look loud, she'd once whispered, and RSVP'd yes to the dinner. I was done hiding. If they were going to parade Julia around like some returning heiress, then they'd have to do it in front of the woman she'd betrayed, the wife she'd helped destroy, the outsider who never quite bowed enough. They thought they knew me, they didn't. Not yet. The dinner was held at the Lachlan estate, what they like to call the summer house, even though it was 10,000 square feet and sat on a bluff overlooking the coast. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose, just to see if they'd wait for me. They didn't. I walked through the grand front doors to the sound of silverware clinking and polite laughter. The butler, Harold, gave me a barely perceptible nod. He looked at me the way people look at lost luggage, like I might have once belonged somewhere but no longer did. Mrs. Lachlan, he said with that tight-lipped smile. They've started with drinks on the terrace, Not Alice, not, "Hi, how are you?" Just, "Mrs. Lachlan," the title they never thought I deserved, said like a bruise. I took the long way around the house, brushing my fingers against the ornate wainscoting I'd picked out during the renovation. Funny. I wasn't trusted to pour wine at board meetings, but I was good enough to redesign the parlor when they thought it was starting to feel dated. On the terrace, everyone was already mid-toast. I caught the last line as I stepped outside. To Julia, home again, and looking more radiant than ever. There she was. Julia stood next to David, hand resting lightly on his forearm like she hadn't just blown up 2 lives. Her hair was pulled back in that effortless French girl way. Her dress a delicate cream silk that screamed money and moral flexibility. Her eyes flicked me, half a second tops, but that was all I needed. There was something smug under her lashes. She didn't look sorry. She looked satisfied. "Ah," said my mother-in-law, turning with all the warmth of a tundra. "Alice, you made it." I smiled. "Wouldn't miss it. I hear we're celebrating family tonight." There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to wrinkle the air. Then the chatter resumed. Too loud, too eager. The family lawyer offered me a drink like it was a peace offering. I took it, but didn't sip. Dinner was served on the back lawn under a white canopy of strung lights and whispered judgments. The table sat 16. I was wedged between David's cousin Harper, who once told me I had a very functional sense of style, and his Aunt Charlotte, who wore pearls like armor and called Target brave. Julia, of course, was seated next to David. They looked like a painting, like something curated and intentional. I watched them laugh over some inside joke I used to be part of, and my stomach twisted. That's when my mother-in-law clinked her spoon against her glass and stood. "I just want to say how thrilled we are to have Julia back. She's always been like one of us. One of us." The words hit like a slap. "And we know," she continued, giving a little glance my way, "that transitions can be awkward. But family is about grace and growth and gratitude. Isn't it, Alice?" Every eye turned to me. I held my gaze steady. Is that what this is? A transition? A few forks paused midair. I only meant, well, these things happen, she said with a little flutter of her hand. And we must evolve. I smiled tightly. Interesting. I thought betrayal had more permanent consequences. The silence after that was thunderous. Later, as dessert was served and conversation drifted toward renovation plans for the summer house, Julia leaned over and whispered, "You don't have to make this harder than it is." I stared at her. "I'm sorry if you feel hurt," she said, her voice a little too smooth, a little too practiced. "But David and I, it just happened. We didn't plan it." "Of course not," I murmured. "You just tripped and fell into each other's lives. Happens all the time." She had the audacity to look wounded. "You and David haven't been close. Everyone sees it. You've grown apart." "And that made it okay?" I asked, voice still calm. "To sleep with someone else's husband?" Julia glanced around, her mask starting to falter. "I didn't come here to fight." "No," I said, taking a sip of wine. "You came here to be welcomed, celebrated, applauded for finally climbing into the right bloodline." Her face hardened. "You don't belong in this family, Alice. You never did." There it was, the truth, not just from Julia, but from all of them. Spoken out loud at last. I stood slowly, my napkin dropping onto the table like punctuation. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" Julia asked, confused. "For saying what they've all been thinking for years." I turned and left the table. Not in a rush, not in tears, but with purpose. I could feel their eyes on my back. The outsider. The reject. The provincial girl who dared to sit at their table. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. Because what they didn't know, I had already started designing something they couldn't take from me. not with their judgment, not with their lawyers, not even with their last name. 2 days after the dinner, I was back in our house, my house, at least for now, sitting on the floor of the sunroom with swatches of fabric scattered like fallen leaves. I hadn't slept. I couldn't stop thinking about the things Julia said, and worse, the things no one else said. No one came after me when I left. Not David. Not his mother. Not a single person from that long white table under fairy lights. I was disposable. I think that was the real betrayal. Not the cheating, not even the smug performance of it all. It was the silence. The kind that confirms exactly what you feared all along. You were never one of them. So I did what I always do when the ground gives out. I created something. Rearranged the furniture in the sunroom. Pulled out old design boards I'd tucked away years ago. Swatches, sketches, mood boards with clipped magazine quotes and ink-smudged annotations. This part of me, this gift, had been buried beneath years of trying to blend into the Lachlan palette. Beige, beige, and more beige. Safe rugs. Wallpaper. That doesn't draw attention. That family treated boldness like a character flaw. And now, I wanted contrast. Drama. Velvet and brass and moody greens. I wanted to feel something again, so I redesigned the entire sunroom. In 48 hours, just for me. 3 days later, I was dropping off dry cleaning when I passed the new cafe on 9th, the one with the empty windows and a "coming soon" sign taped crookedly on the door. Something about it tugged at me. The bones of the space were beautiful. Arched windows, exposed beams, sunlight that poured in like it was trying to be art. The owner, a woman named Priya, was inside on a stepladder, struggling to hang a cheap plastic pendant light that screamed contractor's clearance bin. I don't know what possessed me, but I walked in. "Sorry," I said, offering a little wave. "I know you're not open yet. I think your pendant's hung too low, and it clashes with the ceiling line." She blinked at me. "You, an interior designer?" I hesitated. I hadn't said those words out loud before, but then I nodded. "Yes, I am." That was the first time I said it like a fact, not a dream. Priya laughed. "You free right now?" 15 minutes later, we were crouched on the floor with napkins and sugar packets as placeholders. She'd sunk everything she had into the cafe and couldn't afford a real designer. So I offered to mock up a few ideas, just for fun. I didn't charge her. I just needed to do something. To remember I still had something of value. Within a week, I'd completely reimagined the space. Soft textiles, vintage copper fixtures, mismatched chairs that felt intentional instead of chaotic. I even designed a custom mural on the back wall. She paid me an espresso and muffins, and honestly, it was the first time I'd felt full in months. On opening day, a local lifestyle blogger wandered in, snapped a photo, and posted it with the caption, "The coziest cafe in town." And whoever designed this, genius. That post went viral. By the end of the week, I had 3 inquiries in my inbox, all strangers, all asking for design consults. And just like that, something had started. David didn't notice. Not that week, not the next. He'd moved into a corporate apartment downtown while we figured things out. But let's be honest, he left the second his mother gave him her blessing. And Julia, of course, was always just available. The divorce papers came a month later. No explanation, no apology, just signatures and a note from his mother's attorneys requesting the immediate surrender of Lachlan family property, namely, our house. The same house I designed every inch of. I laughed, actually laughed. They wanted me gone, quietly erased, like I was a phase they regretted and needed to scrub from the records. But I'd already started something they couldn't undo. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel scared. I felt ready. My first real client came through Instagram. Her name was Tessa Monroe, owner of a boutique candle shop, and one of those women who made wide-leg trousers and messy buns look like a lifestyle. She DM'd me after seeing the cafe photos. Would love your help making my studio feel like a space people want to stay in, she wrote. It's giving sterile therapist's office right now. I met her that Friday. She greeted me barefoot, with a chai latte in one hand and a baby goat curled up in a basket by the window. I swear I'm not making that up. Don't ask, she said, laughing. His name's Miso. Her shop smelled like sandalwood and citrus, but the space really did look like a dentist's waiting room. Cold lighting, gray walls, and furniture that screamed mid-range office catalog. I want people to feel wrapped in a hug when they walk in, she said. I smiled. Then, we're throwing out these chairs first. 3 weeks later, Tessa posted a full photo tour of the new space. Rich amber tones, layered textures. A velvet couch in marigold that caught the afternoon sun like fire. The post exploded. My inbox flooded overnight. People wanted color, warmth, comfort. But more than anything, they wanted something that felt human. I gave them that. And I gave them my story. I didn't try to pretend I was some big agency. I told the truth. I was starting over, building something from scratch, fueled by grit and good lighting. It worked. By the end of that month, I had 4 clients and a waiting list. I named the business North House Studio, a nod to my father's garage and the little shed out back where I used to rearrange lawn chairs and string up fairy lights like I was auditioning for HGTV. I rented a tiny studio space above an old bakery, just big enough for a drafting table and mood board wall. Painted it olive green, hung a sign in the window that said, "Design that feels like home." And for the first time, I believed I could actually make it. Then the envelope arrived, cream-colored, heavy, the kind of envelope that never carries good news. It was from the Lachlan family lawyers. They were petitioning for the property, my home. They claimed it was gifted to David by his family, and therefore not subject to divorce division, even though the deed had both our names. Even though I'd paid for half the renovations with money I'd saved freelancing and side hustling since before we were married. There was a clause, buried in the prenup, that his mother had insisted on. In the event of separation, any property obtained through Lachlan inheritance shall revert to the primary bloodline. I remember that phrase. It sounded like something from a royal will. I'd signed it. Back then, I was too in love and too eager to belong, to question anything. And now, they were using it to take the one place I still called mine. My lawyer, Jenna, was as furious as I was. "This is a land grab wrapped in legacy language," she said. "But unfortunately, it could hold." She paused. Unless what? Unless you walk away before it goes to court. Settle. Clean break. Cut the cord now. And just let them take it? She didn't answer. I knew the smart thing was to walk away. Protect my business, my peace, start fresh. But I couldn't shake the rage. They weren't just taking the house. They were taking credit, claiming my design, my work, as part of some untouchable family legacy. Rewriting the story like I'd never existed. That night, I packed a single overnight bag and walked through the house one last time, room by room. Every corner held a memory, and every memory was laced with something sour. I thought I'd feel heartbroken, devastated, wrecked. I didn't. I felt clean, like I was stepping out of a skin I never should have been asked to wear. I left the keys in an envelope on the marble island, along with a note written on the back of a receipt from North House Studio. I may be walking away from this house, but not from what I built. Good luck copying that. 3 weeks after I walked out of that house for good, North House Studio had more work than I could handle. I was still designing solo, just me, my laptop, and a wall full of thumbtacked samples. But word had gotten out. Priya's Cafe had a 2-month reservation list. Tessa's shop made it into a local best of feature. And I was getting emails from boutique hotels, restaurants, even a wellness center in Sonoma that found me through Pinterest. That was the moment I stopped second-guessing myself. I wasn't just doing this, I was this. So I hired my first assistant, Nina, a freshly graduated design student who showed up to our interview with a stack of fabric books and a sketchbook full of ideas better than half the firms in town. "You're not like other bosses," she said after our first week. "Is that a compliment or a red flag?" She grinned. "Definitely a compliment. Most design firms don't let juniors pitch concepts on day one." I shrugged. "Most firms haven't been erased and replaced by their husband's mistress." She blinked. "Wait, what?" I smiled, flipping through swatches. Long story. But let's just say revenge looks really good in boucle. And then came the call. I was in the middle of reviewing renderings for a bakery when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail until I saw the area code, Lachlan and Sons. My jaw clenched as I picked up. Alice, hi! It's Martin Kent. I'm the general manager for Lachlan Interiors." I blinked. "Lachlan? What?" "We've recently rebranded our legacy showroom. New leadership's trying to update the look. We're hoping to attract a younger market, maybe move into commercial hospitality spaces." He cleared his throat. "We've been following your work, and we're very interested in bringing you on as a consultant." I was silent for a beat too long. "Hello?" he asked. "I'm here," I said. "I'm just waiting for Ashton Kutcher to jump out and tell me I'm being punked," Martin chuckled. "No, this is real. We think your aesthetic aligns with the direction we're moving in." I stared out the window of my tiny studio, at the ivy curling over the frame, the sun spilling across the drafting table I built myself. I thought about the family who once said I didn't belong, the same one who now wanted to hire me. I cleared my throat. "Can I ask who referred me?" There was a pause. "It came from the top. Your name was suggested by Mrs. Lachlan." I actually had to laugh. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think, not just about what this meant, but what it could mean. Because the truth is, my business was growing, yes, but there's growing. And then there's scaling. A contract with Lachlan Interiors would mean budgets, resources, distribution. It would also mean working with the very people who once looked at me like I'd tracked mud into their pristine world. But something inside me, something sharp, said, "Take the meeting." So I did. The office was different than I remembered. Sleeker, less dark mahogany, more industrial glam. But it still smelled like power, and polished wood, and 3 generations of generational wealth. I walked into the conference room in head-to-toe black and gold, a far cry from the soft pastels I used to wear to look approachable. David wasn't there, but his mother was. She sat at the head of the table like she'd been waiting for me. Like this was her game, and I was just another piece. "Alice," she said, cool as ever, "thank you for coming." "Let's skip the pleasantries," I replied. "You want me to design for a family who tried to erase me." "I want you," she said, folding her hands, "because I've come to realize the firm needs someone with your instincts. Instincts. As in, the ones she used to call tacky. The ones she said were too provincial for Lachlan taste." "Let me be clear," I said, leaning forward. "If I come on board, it's on my terms. My brand stays mine. My name stays front and center. I don't play shadow designer." Her lips tightened. "This isn't personal. It always was," I said softly. "But now? It's business." There was a long, loaded silence. And then, she nodded. I left that meeting with a deal memo in hand. A real one. Respectfully generous. Professionally sound. I hadn't decided if I'd sign it yet, but I had decided on something else. Something bigger. Because if they were willing to hire me, they were probably willing to sell. And I had just the leverage to make it happen. I didn't sleep that night. Not from anxiety. No, from clarity. There's a certain electric hum that runs through your body when you realize you have leverage. The same people who once dismissed me as unpolished now wanted my name on their brochure. And if they wanted to license my aesthetic, they'd have to do it the right way. Or not at all. But I wasn't thinking small anymore. I didn't want a piece of the table. I wanted the table. So I called Simone, my new business attorney. Sharp, calm, and the only person I trust to explain contracts without mansplaining Clause B14. "I want to buy Lachlan Interiors," I said. Simone paused. "Bold. I like it. But you realize this isn't just a purchase. It's a takeover." "Exactly." She leaned into her speakerphone, the way she does when things get real. "They've got lineage, Alice. Press clippings, old money connections." "What do you have?" I smiled. "A viral brand, clients with deeper pockets than their trust funds, and a design portfolio that's booked out until next spring." She was quiet for a second. "Let me make some calls." The first step was research. Nina and I dug into their books, like two women on a mission, and what we found, let's just say, things weren't as solid as they pretended. Lachlan Interiors was flailing. They'd overextended with a recent warehouse expansion. Their rebrand was hemorrhaging cash. They'd lost 3 big hotel accounts in the last year alone. They weren't hiring me from a position of power. They were reaching out because they were desperate, which made my timing perfect. The next time we met, I brought Simone with me. We sat across from the family's lawyer and Mrs. Lachlan, who still wore her pearls like they came with legal immunity. "I won't waste your time," I said, placing a crisp proposal folder on the table. "In addition to declining the consultant position," Simone began, "Ms. Morrow is prepared to make an offer for full acquisition of the Lachlan Interiors commercial division." Their lawyer blinked. "You want to buy the company?" "Not the company," I clarified. "The division, the showroom, the rights to the brand's commercial projects and distribution." "That's not for sale," Mrs. Lachlan said immediately. "It is," Simone countered, flipping to the balance sheets, "especially when the alternative is slow collapse under debt servicing and backlogged inventory." I added, "You asked for my name. I'm offering a partnership with a buyout clause. You keep the family showroom on Main, I take the rest. Your legacy doesn't die. It just, evolves." There was silence, and then, for the first time since I'd known her, Mrs. Lachlan looked rattled. Not angry, not superior, just unsure. "I built this," she said quietly. "No," I said, matching her tone. "You inherited it. I built something from nothing." Simone slid the contract across the table. "The offer's good for 5 days. After that, we're walking." I expected her to refuse, to laugh, to kick me out of the conference room. But 2 days later, I got the call. They accepted. I cried. Not loud, not messy, just a quiet release, like air escaping a tire that's held in too much for too long. Because I didn't just win, I earned it. They tried to take my home, my marriage, my dignity, but I bought their business. And now? The girl they once called too plain to represent the brand would be printing her name across the front door. The keys were still warm when Simone dropped them into my palm. "There's something poetic about this," she said, unlocking the glass front door with a smirk, "taking over the very building where they once barely offered you coffee." I smiled. I used to sit in the back conference room, pretending to be grateful for being invited. Now I own the deed. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. And just like that, I walked into my new headquarters. The showroom was exactly as I remembered. High ceilings, antique moldings, and rows of dusty, outdated displays that hadn't been touched since the Bush administration. It was all lacquered wood and muted florals, desperately clinging to some upper-crust fantasy of luxury that had long since expired. "This place needs therapy," Nina whispered, stepping in behind me with a floor plan rolled under one arm and 2 oat lattes in a tray, "and maybe an exorcism." "I have both scheduled," I said with a grin. We stood in the middle of the space, spinning slowly, eyes tracing the bones of the building. I could see it already, the render in my mind. The walls stripped bare and painted matte clay, the chandeliers swapped for hand-blown glass pendants. Long wooden tables where designers could brainstorm, collaborate, sketch. Velvet lounge chairs by the fireplace for client consults. A wall of mood boards, another of accolades, A showroom that didn't just sell products. It told a story with my name on it. We launched the rebrand exactly 30 days later. North House Atelier, a boutique design studio with its own commercial line. Custom furniture, curated decor, and full-scale residential and hospitality packages. Everything modern, rooted in warmth. My exact vision, finally alive. The opening party was invite-only, and every name on that list had once doubted me. I wore white, tailored, sharp, unapologetic. The space glowed with amber light and clinking champagne flutes. Local press showed up. So did a few major industry editors. Tessa and Priya brought flowers. Nina's eyes shimmered with pride. And halfway through the night, just as I was thanking a new client for their glowing review of our Malibu retreat project, I saw them. David and Julia. I hadn't seen either of them in nearly 4 months. I'd heard through the grapevine that things had cooled, and Julia had returned to freelance marketing after leaving a brand campaign half-finished for some wellness tea startup. They stood in the doorway, awkward and a little overdressed, clearly invited by someone who hadn't cleared the list with me. David's gaze swept the room with hesitation, and then he saw me, for a second, just one. His expression cracked. Shock, recognition, regret. I didn't look away. I didn't offer a smile. I just turned, lifted my glass, and toasted someone else entirely. Later that night, when the crowd had thinned and the lights dimmed low, I stood by the front window and watched the last few guests trickle into Ubers and town cars. "You did it," Nina said quietly beside me. "No," I replied, exhaling slowly. "We did. Because this wasn't just my victory. It was a reclamation. Of space. Of name. Of worth. I had stepped into the very building where I was once treated like a charity case and turned it into a cathedral of capability. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten note on linen stationery left in a navy envelope with embossed initials, J.L. Julia Lachlan. Of course, Nina found it in the morning mail pile. Looks like it was hand-delivered. I opened it slowly, expecting venom or some slick PR apology about past mistakes and moving forward with grace. Instead, it read, "Alice, I saw the space. It's beautiful. More than beautiful, actually. It's brilliant. Everything I never had the courage to do myself. I'm sorry. For David. For me. For everything I thought I deserved at your expense. I know this doesn't change what happened, but I wanted to say it anyway. Julia." I read it twice. Then once more. And for a long moment, I just sat with it. Not because I believed she deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved to decide what I did with it. Later that week, the phone rang. I recognized the number before I even picked up. David. I should have let it go to voicemail. But curiosity is a muscle that flexes when you least expect it. "Alice," he said. "Hi." Silence stretched. "I saw the write-up in Design Weekly," he added. "The brand, the space. It's incredible." I waited. "I just wanted to say congratulations," he said. You've come a long way." I could hear the weight in his voice, that mix of awe and maybe a little fear. The realization that the person he left had become someone he couldn't touch now, even with all his family's money and connections. "I didn't come a long way," I said quietly. "I just stopped waiting for you to see what was already there." He didn't respond. "I hope you find whatever it is you're still looking for," I added. "But you won't find it in me." I hung up, calm, complete. And this time, I didn't cry. 6 months later, North House Atelier made its first acquisition, buying out the last remaining shares of Lachlan Interior's hospitality division. They'd hoped to stay afloat with one last investor, but after a quiet call from my attorney to the potential buyer, that deal never happened. A week later, the Lachlan name quietly exited the commercial design space, replaced on the showroom window by mine. I didn't gloat. I simply stood outside that glass storefront, fingers tracing the gold leaf lettering, North House Atelier, founded by Alice Morrow. Not Mrs. Lachlan, not someone's wife, just me. The studio thrived. We hired 2 more designers, then opened a second location in Portland. Nina took on her first lead project, crushed it. Our client list grew faster than I could track. But what mattered most wasn't the press or the bookings or even the revenue. It was that, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was standing in someone else's shadow. I was home, in a space I built from floorboard to ceiling beam. Some nights, I walked through the studio after hours. Lights low, music humming softly from the speakers. I run my fingers over the furniture I helped shape. The warm oak tables, the emerald velvet couches, the brass sconces that throw golden light against the walls. I don't think about David anymore. Not the way I used to. Now, when I think of him, I don't feel anger. Or hurt. Or loss. I feel distance. Like watching a memory recede in the rear-view mirror of a car I never should have gotten into. One evening, I hosted a panel of female founders, creators who built their businesses from grit and grief and ground zero. Afterward, a young woman approached me, her eyes glassy with quiet determination. "How did you do it?" she asked. "After all that betrayal?" I smiled. Not a performative one, a real one. "I stopped looking for a seat at someone else's table," I said, "and built my own." She nodded, like she needed to hear it twice. "It's just hard, you know? When you're not taken seriously." "I know," I said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "But you don't need their permission to rise. You only need your own. Have you ever been underestimated or excluded, only to prove everyone wrong in the end? So here I am, not the girl from the wrong side of the tracks, not the wife in the background, not even the woman they tried to erase. I'm the name on the door, the builder of the brand, the one who walked away empty-handed and came back holding the deed. They saw me as someone who didn't belong, and now they don't belong in my world, not anymore."